Peiper had ordered his tanks to push out of the way in this horse-drawn artillery and stuff. And they got here late in the afternoon.
This is the Scheid bridge.
Now the story is that when they got here, this bridge was down. And although they had engineers, they were, of course, the engineers with the Spitzer didn't have bridging with them, and any bridging there was way back down the line. And the essential bits for any bridge were missing. That's what the story is. And therefore, no progress could be made. Allegedly, Peiper arrives here and says, "What's the matter with you guys? All you have to do is drive down there and cross the railway at the bottom," which is precisely what they did. Now, whether it's true that Peiper did that, or whether, in fact, Sternebeck, the leading tanks, made their own decision and just bypassed the cutting and crossed at the shallow part and got on. But it did cause, there's no doubt, considerable delay, this problem, amazingly. You'd think it would be, you know, no problem at all to just drive and bypass, but it did cause a lot of confusion to the Germans, this. Quite amazing. But anyway, what you basically got is nose to tail almost now, the Kampfgruppe spreading back 20 kilometres. Bits of it not even has come out of its assembly area to get on to the main route yet. The reconnaissance battalion never moved that day at all. Still stuck back at back. When the Spitzer, Sternebeck, and his 7 tanks and 2 Pioneer half-track reaches Losheim. Now, of course, Losheim hasn't been taken, and so the decision is made to put this sector, to take it away from the paratroopers and the Volksgrenadiers and put it under command of the 1st SS. And Peiper is ordered, can't go through Losheim, therefore to divert to Lanzarat, which has now been captured by the paratroopers. After a long day's fight, where Burke and the INR platoon of the 394th did obviously an outstanding job.
Yes.
The paratroopers actually lost, I think it was 13 men that day.
To the INR platoon?
Well, it's quite interesting. I don't believe it was all to the INR platoon. I believe that the tank destroyers actually played a much bigger part than they're given credit for. We go straight back the way we've come. 9:40 in the morning. The tank destroyers and the 2nd Recon Platoon abandoned Lanzarat according to their INR. So from 9:40 in the morning there was only the INR platoon left in Lanzarat. So the bulk of the casualties were probably inflicted by the INR platoon. But I personally think the 820th must have had a hand in it as well to inflict that number of casualties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 113. The 1st Battalion of the 9th Parachute Regiment lost 92. They were the people doing the main attack onto Lanzarat. The basic German order of march, I mentioned the Spitzer with Sternebeck, 2 Panthers and 5 Type 4s and the 2 Pioneers. And then you had the Spitzer Company Group under Preuss, which was the 10th Pioneer Company with an anti-tank platoon and with tanks of the 6th Pioneer Panzer Company. And then came the command group with Peiper and Diefenthal and Berchke. When we get to Losheim, Mary France, we turn left at the church.
At the church?
It says we can't go down that way, but we can. I've got a pass from the customs man.
Oh!
Just by this
house.
Yeah.
You see here where the P for parking is.
Yep.
Down there. That's it. So this is the way that the Kampfgruppe had turned, having been ordered to divert to Lanzarote. And it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, dark, and they turned down here. And German intelligence, in fact, was not at all good. What they had forgotten was that one of their own minefields straddled this road.
Oops.
Now this hasn't changed at all, it's exactly the way it was, except it's been resurfaced. But otherwise, what you see now is what they saw in 1944. Just like to pause here. So now the minefield ran across the front here. You see there's a big dip down on the left. Now this is the way the Spitzer came, and eventually the Kampfgruppe used this route and the route which runs along that ridge on our left. You can see there's a ridge there. Well, there's a road. You can see it on the map. It's the main road running from the Scheid turning, running parallel to this. But at this stage, 6 o'clock in the evening of the Saturday, Stavelot's coming down here, he's leading the whole thing, and he runs into this minefield and loses 2 Panthers, Sturnebeck's own Type 4. There's quite an interesting story that they lost the leading Panther. They brought the engineers forward, the pioneers forward, and they spent a couple of hours prodding and clearing, and then they advanced again. And the story is, on the German side, that the commander of the 2nd Panther deliberately drove onto the mines because he was a coward. And that he was then ordered out of his tank at gunpoint by Pötschke, who ordered him into an SPW with a rifle and said, "You are no longer a Panzer, you're a Panzer Grenadier and you fight as a private soldier."
Oh my.
Now, this is a lovely German story, I don't know if it's true. Anyway, they lost, I mean, the 2 best tanks of the Spitzer were now kaput. So we go on slowly.
Before even contacting the enemy.
That's right. And the same thing, in fact, had happened to our south with Hansen. He'd run into the same, basically the same minefield, an extension of it. But anyway, they plodded away and got their way through these mines. A lot of the books say that Peiper ordered everyone to drive through the minefield. There's no evidence to support that. It's just a typical sort of Hollywood type story. That's not at all what Sturnebeck, who was commanding the Spitzer, says. Now these cobbles on the left and right of the road would be the original ones. The edging to the road itself. And it would probably have been just a dirt track with cobbled edges. 44. You are now in the heart of the minefield. Of course, this caused a tremendous delay. They've been delayed all day, and now they're being delayed again in a minefield. Tank destroyers in Scheid, which is this village we're just coming to, they bugged out at 1100 hours. And I think they probably caused quite a lot of casualties from these houses on the advancing paratroopers, but I can't prove that. And I think they've been slightly maligned, these tank destroyer crews. Really as a result of Burke, who said they all just ran. Lanzarote, everyone's assumed they all just ran. I'm not sure that's just. So they're right here. in this area somewhere, Stronebeck, and he couldn't remember where his tank went up on a mine as well, so we now lost a Mark IV as well. Peiper says he got to Losheim, where that little church was, at about 7:30 in the evening. This is now more original. If you could stop just here.
Yeah.
Again, Alan's got a picture of this church here. Never looked at before, but remember it now. 134, 36. Right. That little church there is this.
Mm.
And one of the, you see this, he alleges anyway, that this gun was in this area. And here we are, this is just here. Now which angle he's looking at it from, we'll have to go a bit further up.
Yeah.
And then see. Can you take that book, Joe?
Yes.
We'll see if we can identify where the gun was, if you want to. I mean, Andrew, there. Get the other side. He's looking back
Yeah.
at it.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to get out and film that or not?
Oh, it's all right.
Just look at it.
Yes, there's the window.
Yeah.
Just the same.
So the gun, can we tell where the gun was from this?
This gun?
Yes. Yeah. The gun was here, and it was facing back down the road. Behind us.
Yes.
This is one of the 820th guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
Right. I've never actually done this with Pallard's book, looking at each picture. But I thought, well, we might as well do it as we're going to do that. No doubt, he's a clever man, the way he's identified all the
Yeah.
spots.
Yes.
Must have taken him a very long time.
Very long
Especially
time.
since this part of the house doesn't look the same.
Not at all. This part.
You go right here. See Manderfeld, where the cavalry, 14th Cav was, 3 clicks to the left. And we're going right to Lanzarote. Now from this road looking right on a clear day, you can easily see Losheim. Burke and his guys reckoned that they could see the paratroopers advancing easily across this ground on the right, which I'm sure they could, because even today you can see, what, 400 or 500 meters.
Yes.
Now which exact building Burke was in, I've never been able to identify. Will Kavanagh might know, I've never asked him. But there are various farms, e.g. the one on the right now, which have very commanding views across to the east. And that, although it looks very well, that is one of the original houses. And there are several on the right here. you see right the way across the Scheid. Another farm there, that's an original. Another one coming up. So it could have been any of these that Burke and his men. But I suspect it would be one pretty close to the village. We've got about another half kilometre to go to the village. Because Burke actually started on the north-west side of the village, and when the cavalry fled, came down into the village.
That's right. Yes.
So you wouldn't have ventured very far forward from the village. So it could have been this one. We're just about on the edge of the village now. That's right. And it was about 10 o'clock when the Spitzer, what was left of it, had already been depleted by 3 tanks, went through the village. The paratroop was in it, and halted a couple of 100 metres to the north side. Could you just stop a second? You see the church on the left there?
Sorry.
Can you back up?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have warned you. Now, it's quite interesting because the Germans say that they actually captured Burke and his men in that church, that they'd fled and hidden in the church. The Americans vehemently deny this story, for fairly obvious reasons, that armed men don't normally go into a church. But the Germans say that's where they were captured. I think it was meant to have been Burke and 13. But I don't know the truth of that. So, anyway, this is the rather depressing little village of Lanzarote, which I've never liked myself. Although John Bowserman had a marvellous evening here when he first got interested in it. He was in one of the pubs, I don't know which one, and they were all very friendly and telling him about the battle, and that's when he really started to get interested. This was many years ago. Okay, we go on. And Peiper arrived here about, the Spitzer having got here about 10 o'clock, Peiper arrived about an hour later, and he met Hoffman, who was commanding the 9th Parachute Regiment, in this cafe here on the right, the Cafe Palm. That's where they met. Now, there's a very good description of this in Charles MacDonald. You know, Peiper comes in using a bayonet.
Oh, this is where that was.
Yeah, he sticks his map up on the wall. It's all fairly dramatic stuff. There are sleeping, bloody Americans lying around as prisoners. There are wounded Germans, you know. It's all highly dramatic stuff. Anyway, there's no doubt he met Hoffman, and Hoffman told him that the woods to the front were full of Americans, and there was no way they were going to get through without heavy artillery, or artillery support anyway. And Peiper's already 16 hours behind schedule, and there's a lot of sorting out needed, but the Panzer Corps put the 9th Regiment under Peiper's command, and there was a big argument about this between Hoffman and Peiper, but eventually he's told he can take the paratroops under command, although he's ranked by Hoffman. And they get going round about 3:30 on the Sunday morning again, with the paratroopers mounted on the tanks, and the Spitzer still leading. And of course, there are no Americans in these woods. They could have advanced the whole time without any problem.
I imagine Peiper was furious.
We go next step. This is where they were.
Here?
Yeah. Originally had been on the left here, his first position somewhere. And then he moved down to the village when the cavalry bugged out. This is where the Spitzer halted, saying, having been told by the paratroopers that this room was full of Americans. What a pity it's so misty. Areas where that tornado swept through 2 or 3 years ago, devastated. So.
What a place to try to fight a tank battle.
Yeah. Again, this hasn't changed at all. Road width. The forest exactly as it was. So it's around about 4 o'clock on the Sunday morning. Pitch dark, of course. Foggy, icy. And this is what's become known as Bucco Station. That's Los Immigrant Station, really, was.
Yeah.
And the station, they just pulled it down just at all. About a year ago, they pulled it down. You go just beyond these logs, Mary plants, and then stop. Just down there.
Yeah. Here?
A little bit further. That's it. That's it. Now you see where on the right, the station was where those trucks are, and the shed. I mean, the actual platform of the station is still there. And this is where the 3rd Battalion of the 394th had been in reserve. And by the time Peiper Spitzer got here, all that was left were about 60 men, the remains of 2 companies. The actual companies were, can I find it? L&M, I think it was. Yeah, L&M companies. And they were basically asleep. And so the Spitzer just bypassed them, just rolled straight through, and they were mopped up by the follow-up Panzer Grenadier Company, George Preuss's 10th Company, and they captured these guys who were here. One of them, a radio operator, allegedly was in the basement of one of the houses here, and he continued to send messages. But whether that's true, I'm not sure. It's certainly quoted by Charles MacDonald. If it's true, what surprises me is that no warnings were then sent to the guys in Honsfeld and Bullingen and all that sort of thing, that there was an armoured column coming this way. This is why I'm a little bit suspicious that it may not have happened. If it did happen, somebody at the 394th Regiment was culpably guilty of failing to take proper action.
I had wondered that too, because there was no
reaction
and no indication in the 394th's records that they ever got such a message.
Exactly. So I think it could be a apocryphal story, but who knows. Now, according to Will Kavanagh, if we go slowly along, Mary Cross, according to Will Kavanagh, the L&M Company guys were behind this house in the forest over on the left, and that may well be true. I think, in fact, they were at the end of this road, and there are slip trenches to prove me right.
Wow.
We'll get out and have a look.
Good.
Now, this was a farm, this area here. There was a guest house here, a pub. Exactly how the 3rd Battalion was deployed here, nobody seems to know. But Kavanagh says that certainly they were on the left of this road as we drive down it. So we go just to the corner here and stop. We'll go down and I'll show you if I can find them again. These trenches. Funny enough, my wife found them 2 years ago, much to my annoyance. She said, "What are those over there, darling? Aren't those slip trenches?" So we'll get out and have a quick. They've had a position here because you cover both roads then. This is the road from Losheimergraben. And this is the road from Losheim and Lanzarote. So obviously one would occupy this position. And I think we're both right, actually. Will says they're on that side of the road. Well, obviously there is a building. That building has been here for many years, or the foundations of it, so I would think the basis of the position was here. And if we can find it, there are slip trenches in the forest. As you call them. I mean, they're only just little indentations. find them. Yes, here we are. There's one. There's one, you see. Another one there. Another one over there. And I've no doubt, if you dug down there, with the metal detector, you'd probably find something. They found a GI here not so long ago, didn't they? Like
Yes.
the year before last?
Yes, they
I've
did.
heard of
Yeah,
it, yeah.
yeah. I met the young Belgian boy. He's part of a group that look for these
Yes.
bodies, 99th Division guys, and I met him at the Café Bedawe.
Oh.
He was telling John Bowser and I about it. And they'd found this fellow. They had a veteran with them, was it about the year before last, and he took them to where they were, and he said, well, the last time I saw him, he was over there. They went over there, they dug down, they found the skeleton and the dog tag straight away. And he'd been MIA for all this time.
Incredible.
Yes, I know the speed.
It is metal. I don't know what it might be. Probably nothing.
Who knows?
Who knows? Quite a lot of troops in it. Had 4 tank destroyer platoons, A squadron of the 32nd Cavalry, which had arrived around midnight, and it also had the resting troops I mentioned of the 394th, about over 100 men. But again, they were all asleep. There were 2 tank destroyers at the entrance to the village, which were not manned. And I got a letter from a chap called Hawkins. In March '89, he wrote to me, and he said, quote, the 1st and 2nd Platoons, Company B, entered Homsveld around 4 a.m. We were instructed for each platoon to take over a house and for everyone to go to sleep, with the exception of leaving a guard on the front door and also the back, which we did. I was sleeping in the attic with 3 or 4 other buddies when I was awakened and told to get up as the Germans had us surrounded. I kicked the man downstairs and told him not to bother us, as I thought he was pulling a prank on us. Immediately one of our sergeants came upstairs 2 at a time and told us that this was no joke, no prank, but the real thing. We go right here now.
What battalion was this?
This is the B Company. Hang on, I just have to look it up. It was 612.
612. I thought so because I went to their reunion a couple of years ago and spoke to a number of the veterans who were in Huntsville.
Right.
Including one who was part of a lineup that some of the SS shot, and he got away. He refused to talk about it.
Did he?
Yes.
Well, that's very interesting.
He historically had refused ever to discuss it with anybody. He was apparently very shaken up.
He didn't give any evidence against them.
I assume not.
Yeah. And we all jumped up and began looking out the windows and saw that German soldiers were everywhere we looked. Peiper claimed 50 reconnaissance vehicles, 15 tank destroyers, 80 deuce-and-a-half trucks. The tank destroyers lost 134 men. They were taken prisoner. A squadron, of course, of the 32nd Cav was wiped out. And the SS were accused of killing 15 Americans and 3 Belgians. Yeah. The only evidence I've ever discovered is hearsay evidence of this fellow Hawkins, is one who gave it, and you just mentioned another, Jack. Jay. There's no firm evidence of these killings, and there are no bodies, no names, you know.
Interesting.
No, who was killed, unlike Normandy, where we got the names of everyone who was dead.
Right.
But we have no names of either the Belgians or the Americans who allegedly were killed here. That's the only thing one can say in defence of the Germans. So whether it happened or not, I don't know.
My contact with the
Just
612
can you
lives.
stop here? Yeah, sorry.
My contact with the 612 lives in Maryland, not far from Annapolis.
Right.
And I talk to him fairly regularly. I could always ask him
Yes.
if there was a way that he could name for me somebody who was a victim.
Yeah. Because as far as I know, there are no, and Jack, neither of us have got any names.
Yes.
Now this is the entrance to the village, where there were 2 tank destroyers here covering the entrance to the village, and these were unmanned. And in these houses, I don't know which one, I suspect the old one on the right, there were 2 captains and a lieutenant were captured. And they were all asleep. Now there is a story that there were American trucks coming in from the right.
I was just about to ask that.
From the 394th, or I don't know, from who, artillery, and that the German tanks, Spitzer, Sternebeck, just tacked on the back. Sternebeck has no recollection of deliberately doing that. He said there may well have been American trucks in front of me, but I didn't know there were. So again, it could have happened, or it may not have happened. It may just be again an apocryphal story. But certainly the commander of the leading German tank does not recall American trucks in front of him.
Interesting.
So there we are, we go into the village. And really there's nothing much to talk about in the village, because there really was no fight here, except that later on in the morning, and this has always been a puzzlement to me, but probably around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, because we're talking now before first light, or
Yeah,
just
that's
after,
right.
That's first light.
Around
coming.
6 a.m. or so.
There's no doubt there was fighting here, because the Germans certainly lost 2 Panthers, and they lost 2 anti-aircraft vehicles. There were air attacks on the Germans here, and artillery fell on them. And I have a feeling that this fire was coming from Hunningen, which sadly we can't see, but is only about 1,200 meters to our right. And the Americans were still occupying Hunningen, of course. And I think as the weather cleared a bit and the Americans could see the Germans transiting, they opened fire. It's the only explanation I've got. But anyway, the paratroopers lost a further 13 killed and 34 wounded in fighting in and around here later in the morning. So there were some Americans doing some fighting here later in the morning, after most of the company had gone through. Precisely who they were and where they came from, I don't know. But certainly you can see this place clearly from Hunningen, and Hunningen was occupied by Americans. If you stop just here, Mary Frances. Too many Mary Frances, Mary Beths. On page, in ballad in front of you, which you've got there, on page 137. This is that was Booker Station, which we've dealt with already, and then here you've got scenes in page 137 in Consulate, where we are now. And if you turn over, there are more, 138 and 139. There are more pictures. Yeah.
That's on 137, Palud? Page 137?
138.
38.
So people say, including Peiper. I don't believe it. I think he was always meant to go to Bullingen, and I think that's why he went to Bullingen, because he knew there was fuel in Bullingen as well. Anyway, he certainly did go to Bullingen. So that's the way we'll go.
Okay.
And as they went down this route, they ran into 8 Lucenarts coming this way and captured them. Sternebeck told me that. One of the reasons that I'm sure that Peiper deliberately came this way, I mean, he said after the war that the route to Heppenbach was in a very bad condition, so he didn't go for that reason. In fact, 2 of the Tiger companies went that way and they had no trouble at all.
At farther back in his column?
Yeah.
And where did they rejoin him?
At Lindyville.
Ah. Okay.
Those that hadn't broken down, because
Yeah.
they had an appalling breakdown rate. Now, around about midnight, the Bullingen, of course, was a very busy place because it was the support centre for both the 2nd and the 99th Divisions. There was a field up there were 3 artillery service batteries, there was a divisional engineer battalion, and the 254th Engineer Battalion was in bivouac, 2 kilometres to the southwest of the town. Now at midnight they got orders to defend the town, and they were told that tank destroyers and light tanks were already in position on the roads leading in. Well, in fact, that was absolute nonsense. There were no tank destroyers and no light tanks in position at all.
That's right, yes.
And so anyway, they deployed 4 o'clock in the morning. One of them was on, A company was on the road to Losheimergraben, in a position there, and at 5 o'clock B company was down at the bottom of this hill here, deployed. Now I don't know precisely where this B company, the 254th was, but I would suspect that it was probably on this next little ridge because it's a reasonable defence position. And certainly Sternebeck talked about defeating enemy in this area. So if we stop just on this next ridge, Mary Frost.
Where?
Just on the hill, just on this little hill. Bullingen is 2 kilometres in front of us, our left front, just here behind. As I said, about 6:30 the Spitzer captured 8 Deuce and a halves coming out of Bullingen. I don't know what they were, but anyway they just ran straight in and were captured. And round about 7 the Spitzer ran into B company of the 254th, which I think was probably here. Now they say in their after action report they repulsed the first attack by Sternebeck and so on. That Peiper got very angry about the delay and ordered Sternebeck to get on and rub this opposition out. The engineers say that 4 Type 4 tanks then attacked them and overran their position. Well, Sternebeck only had, he did have 4 Type 4s at this stage. He didn't have any Panthers, but he did have 4 Type 4s, so that does fit. Anyway, B company then took off. Now, Sternebeck says he lost a tank here, but I don't think it was from these engineers. I think it was from a chap called Grant Jaeger, you've probably heard about.
Yes, I have.
Much closer in to the town itself. And that makes sense to me, that Jaeger fired his bazooka and hit this Type 4 of Sternebeck's. Anyway, a Type 4 was lost, but I don't think it was here, so we'll go on. And really, these engineers, they didn't really achieve very much. It's a small delay.
Yes.
Now, Grant Jaeger was with the 924th Service Battery artillery, and he says that he and a couple of other guys, Romaker and Donaldo or something, were ordered to take a bazooka, and that they took up a position half a mile out of Honsfeld on this road, and that they fired, he fired the bazooka and knocked out a tank, or certainly 622 was knocked out. It was the tank behind Sternebeck. Sternebeck was leading. And it fits exactly with what Grant Jaeger says, because he said he fired at the 2nd tank. So it all fits very neatly. Precisely where it was, I don't know, but it's somewhere just up here now. In about this position, I would suspect. And I'm going to just stop us by the side, by these cars. Now, Sternebeck, the route he should have taken was left at this junction, which leads you into the main part of Bullingen. But he didn't have a map, and he turned right here, which is, I mean, there's no reason why he shouldn't turn right. It's still not daylight, proper daylight. It's about 7:30 in the morning. And anyway, Sternebeck goes right. He's lost a tank, but he motors on and he goes right. And I said, I think we ought to do that because it'll explain how he ended up on the Witzfeld Road, where he lost another tank to tank destroyers, because that's what you're interested in, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And then, if you like, we can come back and take the route that the rest of the Kampfgruppe took. So if we go up here and bear right, Harry France. This is the way Sternebeck went.
Yeah.
And he said, I was lost, I got lost. That's where he should have gone left there, but he goes down here. Now this automatically leads you out to the north side of the town, which is the Witzfeld Road. And away from the fuel dump where the rest of the guys went. Quite a big place going on in it.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Now here he goes straight across, as we will. Because he hasn't got a map, he doesn't really know where he's going, so, but he thinks he's going through Bullingham, which is what he's been ordered to do. As you can see on the map, Witzfeld is only a couple of clicks up this road. Now Pallard's got a picture here of Sternebeck's tank knocked out on this road. I can't identify the spot, but I'm prepared to accept what Pallard says. If I can find the picture, because I haven't made a note of it. We'll go up just to the top of the hill, always going to turn around.
So I have to go on the left.
Sorry, no, we go right.
Oh, sorry.
See, you have a problem. You can imagine what Sternebeck was like.
Yeah, very good.
It was the 644th tank destroyer battalion that knocked out this tank. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this because a lot of the books, including Charles MacDonald, says that this was a deliberate attempt by Peiper to come up this way. It was not at all. This was Sternebeck lost, pure and simple. And anybody that says this was an attempt by Peiper to take this route, I'm afraid, is a serious error. We'll just go to the top and, well, anyway, right, we can turn around now. We go to the top and we can see Witzfeld. Perhaps that's worth doing. Left here.
Your left?
Left here. You see, this is all new, this road. They've done this in the last couple of years. This is the old road. Now, it's somewhere here that this tank was knocked out. I'll try and find a picture of Pallard. I think if you stop by this green sign, Harry France, you can see Witzfeld from here, if I remember rightly. There's Witzfeld in front of you there, you see.
Oh, yeah.
But we needn't go there. Let me just try and, while you turn around, I'll try and find this picture. The tank knocked out.
So I have to turn?
Yeah, turn around, we go back the way we
We
came.
go back.
descriptions. The Germans say that the 10th Panzer Grenadier Company fought through the town in a very confused battle, with literally American trucks pulling out side by side with German SPWs, literally advancing beside them, almost like cowboys and Indians. But anyway, the Germans took casualties. They lost 2 platoon commanders wounded. It was quite a bitter fight. And the engineers and anybody else who joined in, because there were all sorts of other people in England, caused the Germans quite a bit of angst. Anyway, by 8 o'clock in the morning at the latest, all the Americans were out of Bullingham, and the Kampfgruppe was beginning to refuel. They were shelled, and they later were, there was an airstrike, American airstrike on Bullingham. But we'll go up now and have a cup of coffee perhaps and look at, I'll show you where the fuel dump was.
Oh, good, good.
And where the airstrip was. Because there was argument about this. There was certainly one airstrip with the light observation aircraft of the 2nd and the 99th Divisions. Some, Will Kavanagh says there were 2 airstrips. When I asked him to show me the second one, he just pointed down a hill and said down there. Well, there's no flat ground where he pointed, so I don't think he knows. But he's been here with one of the pilots, or one of the pilots has been here with Kavanagh. So there's no doubt where one of the airstrips was. But I can't think why they would have 2 airstrips. I mean, it makes sense for all the aircraft to be on one airstrip and to share the facilities, but maybe they didn't. I don't know. Go right here. Then up the hill, straight up.
Yeah.
I had wondered that myself in the account of the 2 airstrips.
Yeah.
And it didn't make good sense to me either, but I couldn't tell from my map because they're not marked. So
Kavanagh says that...
I would be willing to believe there was only one.
Yeah, I would. Kavanagh says, and he gets this, the German claim to have knocked out most of the aircraft.
Right.
Kavanagh says 7 aircraft from the 2nd Infantry Division were destroyed, but the 99th Div aircraft got away. I don't know. Now, can you see somewhere for a cup of coffee?
Maybe on
We
the
go
other
left
side?
and right.
Yeah.
We don't want to go in that hotel there, because that's the one that Will Kavanagh says he doesn't like the man.
Ah, which are those? Where is
So
it?
we won't go in that one. The Darman. Don't go in the Darman.
Ah, that's the hotel.
Yeah.
Mm,
Oh no, let's go in there. Let's go.
Yeah.
There's a Rolf Earhart, you know, the tank driver. He talks about capturing Americans sleeping in a pup tent by this chemist's here. Just there. We go left here, Mary Franks.
Yeah.
Now, this area under the trees, this was the fuel dump.
Yeah.
Here.
Ah.
According to Kavanagh. I mean, I wouldn't know, but he swears. And the German, no, not just Kavanagh, the Germans say the same. This was the fuel dump.
Well, it would make sense. It's an open area in the middle of town.
Exactly, and it's
adjacent
got,
to some
roads on
major
both
roads.
sides,
Yeah, that
perhaps.
would make
It's got
sense.
a circuit, you see.
Certainly.
And it went further up. It wasn't just this little bit of green. It went up further up the road. But if we go on up here, we just see where Kavanagh says the airstrip was.
Ah, good.
It's about 400 metres. It's a road to the left. Now he swears this is true because he says he'd been here with one of the pilots from the 2nd Division, or no, 99th Division. And really what he's basically saying is the airstrip was up on that ground up there. Oh, yes, just stop here. Up there. That's where Kavanagh says the airstrip was.
I see.
Now when I said where's the 2nd airstrip, he pointed down there. Well, there's no flat ground down there. And I don't think there's room. So I believe that there was probably one airstrip up on the top there. And it is flat, as you can see. It's long enough. So I can only accept what Will Kavanagh says. Now this is the route that the Kampfgruppe took. The Americans, the remains of the American engineers had gone, you look at 2 o'clock from us now, over there. That's the road to Buchenbach, or Don Buchenbach. They set up with a scratch force of clerks and cooks and all sorts of people on the road to Don Buchenbach. And to their amazing that the Kampfgruppe didn't come their way. They were expecting to be attacked.
That's right.
The Peiper came this way, but he's heading now for Morschek and then Chopin and so on. Now, Sternebeck with the Spitzer, he's now down to 2 tanks and 2 SPWs. He actually did go up that road,
Yes.
and he went to where the big Red One Memorial is now.
That's right, yes.
Turned left there and came down and rejoined the Kampfgruppe at Morschek.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
And he says that when he got to where the memorial is, there was some American medical outfit at the domain, at the manor, and a doctor came out to surrender. And but he just waved him aside and turned left and came back onto this route.
Is that right? I hadn't heard that.
That's what Sternebeck says. He said he's dead now. And it was while the Kampfgruppe was coming on this route that the airstrike came in. They say, the Germans say they shot 2 of the American planes down. As I say, the Americans claimed 7 Messerschmitts, but I don't know whether those are correct.
I assume it was less foggy at that point than it is now, because there's no way you'd be able to carry out an airstrike in this fog.
No, that's right. The weather was clear that morning. So the Germans say. This, of course, is the ground to the right across which Yugen attacked later in the battle.
That's right.
Against Now, when they got, this is Morschek, 616 as the Germans call it. And most people think the Kampfgruppe went left here down to Scheid. They didn't. They went straight across. And it was a track. It wasn't a tarmac road as it is now. But Scheid, the easy way to it is down to the left and turn right. In fact, they went straight across here. And I came here with Bortman and Sternebeck, that group. We did this route. Now they got, from here to Tirimont, they got into terrible trouble, the Germans, because of the state of the ground. They had a lot of vehicles getting bogged. We're going to be able to go through here. Not what have to go.
You should have brought your Jeep.
Yeah.
And the tanks, this is one of the, in fact it's the only place from here to Tirimont where the tanks went cross-country. And a lot of them got stuck and had to be pulled out by
I can imagine. This terrain is a tanker's nightmare.
Yeah,
Muddy ground, lots of trees.
that's right. And although the temperature was around 0, of course, just below the surface it was all soft.
That's right.
So they thought they were on reasonable surfaces, but because once they broke through it, which the weight of a tank did easily,
Yeah.
particularly as tank followed tank, Peiper got absolutely hopping mad that everybody followed in a single file. And of course they destroyed the route totally. So wheeled vehicles had no chance of following.
No.
This is why Sandy got such a mess later on. It took so long to get through to Stavelot. And the other interesting thing, Marder and I have come to the conclusion that the SPWs of the 9th and the 3rd Pioneers, probably because the track on the SPW was pretty narrow and it wasn't a very good cross-country vehicle, and they always tried to stay on roads and tracks when they could. We think they probably went through Faymontville and Weymouth, possibly Weymouth to get to Vernier, which would account for the change in the order of march later by the time they got to the massacre site. Because Bowserman and I puzzled for a long time how we get the 3rd and 9th Pioneers so far forward in the column all of a sudden. We think it's because they took a better route than the tanks. And the only better route you can have is through Faymontville. it was around about 10 o'clock in the morning when the constable was coming along there on the Sunday. Peiper, in fact, had gone to Bungenbach instead of coming this way. He would have cut off the 1990.
And the second.
And it could have led to total panic and chaos. The north shoulder could have collapsed, in fact.
That's true.
But that's one of the ifs.
Had he known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he said in his interrogation he was aware that he was behind the people defending Großheimergraben. But he said, you know, my orders were to get to the Meuse. My job wasn't to start trying to rip sweeps and cut off divisions or anything like that. I had one order only, get to the Meuse. So this is motor Scheid, the direct, easy way to motor Scheid, which is the way they took. As opposed to what you'll find on most maps, which doesn't show this route. I always used to go the way they've now got a no entry sign. They've obviously blocked the route on. Somewhere on this route they captured 2 ambulances and also the 4 military government police vehicles of the 32nd Armoured. And these guys, of course, were taken with the column and eventually ended up in the field in Normandy. But the 4 jeeps of the 32nd Armoured, they were made to drive themselves within the column. The ambulances were dumped and the crews were just put on the vehicles.
Called P in French, but in English I don't know.
Right, well, the main part of the Kampfgruppe went left here. Just
Here?
Yeah. Down there. Now, I don't think we better risk it because, well, we could have a go if you
Yes.
like, but I think we'll have to turn round probably.
We
Now,
can.
the interesting thing is there that I believe, and so does Mauder, that the SPWs of the 3rd and the 9th companies went straight on here to Peimontville.
I go straight on?
Well,
Or I
it's safer.
try?
I think it's safer
Yeah?
to go on because
Okay.
there's nothing interesting to see.
No, okay.
Nothing happened there, except that a lot of the vehicles
yeah.
got stuck in the mud. So you do have an accident. I mean, without it, you had a good chance of avoiding
That's
coming towards you.
Yes.
I think I know where I am. Yes. Go to Turimont from here.
The road from Waymes to Bonnier?
No, this is the road to Turimont. We're just going to rejoin Peiper's route.
Ah, yes, okay.
From Bullingen. That was took this place, which was started on the 13th of January. The 30th Division, was the 120th Infantry, attacked this area. It was being held by the 9th Feldschirmjäger Regiment. It took the Americans 3 days to capture this village. It cost them 1,390 men, plus 463 who were casevaced with frostbite and trench foot. They lost 17 tanks, and they fired 11,000 rounds at this village. Shattering. And the village was destroyed.
Amazing.
And the German paratroopers here put up a phenomenal resistance. Absolutely phenomenal. I came here with Dick Stone, who were in the 526th Infantry, because they were part of this battle as well. And he was captured, in fact, in the attack on a place called Hedemore, which is just the other side of the road. But amazing, quite amazing the resistance that these paratroopers put up. And they were not first-grade troops, these paratroopers. Some of them were from the Navy, they were all Luftwaffe anyway.
Yes.
But it just shows the German fighting spirit, what they were capable of. Powder and I understand it. That letter, I think, might confirm it. When they got here, Preuss was in the lead, and the Spitzer, although to rejoin, was behind him. Can you stop just on the corner here? Stop here.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the map, go off onto there. Just there.
Here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at the map, stop there. That road to the left is the direct way to Ligneville. There's a little track. Where are we?
Wrong side.
Where's two more there? Now that's that road there. It comes out there, you see?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that is the logical way to go to get to Ligneville, which is where they're trying to get to, because by now Peiper is in a jeep with an American officer that he's captured somewhere here. And this American officer has told him that there is an American brigade or a headquarters of some size in Ligneville. In fact, it's Timberlake's 49th anti-aircraft.
That's right.
Peiper doesn't know that, but he knows there's an American headquarters. He wants to get there, he wants to capture it, because he wants the maps, and he wants to know what the American layout is, and of course he thinks he'll probably find it there. So he's in a hurry to get there. Now, Mauder and I believe that Preuss, therefore, took this route, and he got totally bogged down at the bottom. You see there's a stream? We can drive down there if you'd like to, and we can come back.
Right.
And that because Preuss went down there and got stuck, Sternebeck was ordered to go this way.
I see.
Now, the moment Sternebeck took that route, this massacre was inevitable.
Yes.
Had Preuss got through, the massacre would never have happened, probably.
Ha.
But if you'd like to, we'll go down
Yeah.
this. Now, Mr. Badawi has told me that after January, or when he came back, there were German vehicles still stuck down there. Now, I don't know whether he's telling the truth
Oh,
or
in
not.
January 45?
Yeah. I rather doubt that Badawi is telling the truth, because Jack has now got a huge blow-up of an aerial photograph dated, I think it's January, I haven't seen it. And he says there are no vehicles on it. But you could have a look at that, Jay, when you get back. I haven't seen it. Jack says there are a lot of vehicle tracks, but he can't see any vehicles on it. But anyway, this is probably what happened. That Preuss came this way, which is the shortcut. Certainly Preuss arrives late in Ligneville, so it adds up from that point of view. Preuss is coming in. See, Badawi couldn't have returned until late 45. Because he was on the Russian front. He wouldn't have come back till after the war, obviously. So he couldn't have been back before Christmas. But he does say, or has said to Mauder, yes, there were German vehicles stuck down here when he returned. But I don't think Jack says he can't see any on any photographs.
If there's roads like this now, I can imagine what it was like in 44 for tanks.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Boyce was trying to bring about 25 SPWs and tanks down here.
They would have churned the ground into pudding.
Yeah. You see, there's no bridge, there's only a culvert.
Yes.
And there may not even have been a culvert in 44. It could have been just a little ford.
Yes, yes.
So we'll have to go on. We can't turn around here, I don't think safely, so I think it's better to go on now. All the way along from 5 Points. It's 800 metres and it runs straight down north to south to Lindyville. Now when Sternebeck emerged from those woods in front of us and looked to his left, he saw strung out on that road the vehicles of Battery B. And he opened fire with, as he put it, 5 to 6 rounds of main armament. In many of the books, many of the American accounts, they say that Panzer Grenadiers debussed and ran across these fields firing, the tanks turned and came across the fields. It's all rubbish. They didn't. They drove to the corner, turned left, went down to the crossroads and turned left, which is much faster than trying to cross the fields, particularly as it's wet down there
Yes.
and muddy. All the Americans talk about mortar fire. We can't understand this. It takes time to set up mortars.
Yes.
So it couldn't have been mortar fire, it was tank fire.
Tank fire, direct fire.
The strange thing is that this is an observation battery, designed, trained to recognise
They should
fire.
know. They should know the difference.
But they didn't.
Fascinating.
So again, it's difficult. Now the other great puzzlement, which I can't get to the bottom of, is that the leading vehicle with Lowry and Mills in it was to the left of, can you see the house with the red roof and the white gable? The extreme left house you can see.
Oh yes.
Over there. Now that's where the leading vehicle was. That is a long shot for a tank from here
Yes.
in those days. I don't know. I have a feeling, and so does Mauder, that some other tanks from the 7th Company firing from the Tyrimont area, the village, were firing at the front of the column.
Which would have been back over this way.
Yeah. In fact, you can see Tyrimont in front of us, directly in front of us. Now that, of course, has a very good view of where the front of the column was. And it's possible that the reason the column stopped, I mean, undoubtedly shells arrived around the front of the column, otherwise why would Lowry stop at Mills? It's possible that the front of the column was from the Tyrimont area and not from there. And that Sternebeck was firing at the right, you could see places to it. But anyway, they certainly stopped. And they did, according to Lowry, he and Mills did discuss, should we drive on to get out of this mess? They made a deliberate decision to stop because they were in charge of the column. So there we are. But that's the view that Sternebeck had of these 25-ish. Jack Bowers and I have a little bit of an argument about how many vehicles there were in the column, but roughly 25, spread out at 25-yard intervals along that road. I reckon that there were 25 trucks, jeeps and so on, plus 4 ambulances. I think Jack reckons there were 26. Wouldn't do if we agreed precisely on everything. There were 4 other trucks, but they actually stopped in Normandy because a corporal got sick. They diverted to the hospital.
4 trucks?
Yeah.
For one sick corporal?
Yep. Which is a bit strange, isn't it?
Yes. And so this is the Café Baudarwy right here?
This is the rebuilt cafe.
Rebuilt, yeah.
The original was burnt down.
That's right.
This is it. We'll go in and have a whatever. Coke and beer.
And where this other stone house back here is the actual massacre field.
Yeah, and we'll just have a look.
That was here?
This one here, this is where Bill Merrican hid in a shed just by the side of that house. The cafe here, the farm there, has been much expanded.
there, but without the white extension, with the other bit.
Okay.
And that's all there was here, nothing else at all. And the actual massacre field is there. It's been split in half by the path going up to the house now, but that is the actual massacre field. And this tree line is original. This path down here and that tree line is original, exactly as it was. In fact, you can see it on the sketches drawn for the trial. This is what appeared at the trial. Cafe, a shed, which was about here. This is this tree line. This is the track running there, and then going off down that tree line. And that is the route to Hedemore.
Yes.
This is the house number 4, house number 5, house number 6, the cafe, house number 7 there with the shed. House number, where's house number 8? I can't remember where house number 8.
The American Memorial at Bonnier, the site of the Malmedy Massacre. Oddly enough, it's across the street from the actual massacre field, which is where that house currently sits. They built the house right in the field. Monument, you can look across the road and see the Café Baudarway, which was overlooking the site during the war, was destroyed during the war and rebuilt since. This crossroads is heavily built up from what it was, as you just heard General Reynolds describe. This is the actual massacre field. And this is the road, I think, too. They've just made it into a series of little pull-offs.
Yeah.
Why are your forests so dark? We have pine forests.
Are dark.
We have pine forests, and I've never seen one this dark.
Because it's money, it's tree.
I guess.
It's
They must set the
Or the-
trees closer together here.
Yeah, could be. Could be.
Summary executions took place, 5 or 6 at the most. Nothing like the alleged massacre announced by the US radio a few days later. This was, he reckoned that the Americans recovered their arms and fired at the main part of the column as it came by. He actually admitted that summary executions took place. 5 or 6
Some, but
at
only
the
5 or
most.
6.
Now this is Libreville. Can you just slow down a little bit? There's a road coming up on the right, not this one. Here, go on slowly. You see there's a blue sign coming up?
Oh,
that road to the right.
Mhm.
Now just look up there, because it forms a triangle to the right, and that was where most of the US trains, as you call them, echelons we call them,
Oh, yes.
were of the 9th Armoured, CCB 9th Armoured, and they were in this triangle formed from the main road, that road on to the right, and then runs down and rejoins further up.
Oh,
There's a
yes.
circuit, in other words.
Yes.
And that's where most of the Americans were. They came in
Nice.
up to the bottom. We'll stop by the monument, Mary France. You know the one to the Americans?
Here
It's on the right,
on the right.
by the Hotel de Bourg.
By the,
You know it?
Yes, I've seen
Yeah.
it.
You can stop
Just
just
there.
on the right behind these white trucks.
Yeah.
Oh, I certainly recognize that hotel.
That's it, the Hotel
Oh,
de
yes.
Bourg. And as you probably know, here in the hotel was Timberlake with his headquarters.
That's right.
And in that triangle, in the northwest part of the town, there were the trains of the 14th Tank Battalion, 27th Armoured Infantry and 16th Field Artillery under Captain Green. And there was a tank dozer which was being repaired and an assault gun which had its engine out. 32 deuce-and-a-half trucks, 200 men roughly. At 1 o'clock, the main part of Timberlake's headquarters moved out, and he stayed behind with 3 officers and 3 enlisted men having lunch. Round about 13:45, there was a warning from someone on foot. Now, I believe myself that the warning came from one of the not survivors of the massacre, but one of the guys from Battery B who ran down the hill from the front of the column. And I suspect it was Lowry's driver, Corporal Lester. But I can't prove it. And so Timberlake bugged out. There's a nice little Belgian story that he had 2 Belgian girls with him in his jeep when he left.
I hadn't heard that.
Hadn't you?
No. No.
I don't know if it's true, probably isn't. And Captain Green, having ordered the trains to bug out, went up the hill here and was captured.
Oh, yes, back up behind us.
Yeah. Sternebeck says that he drove straight down, he went round the corner, stopped at the bridge, ordered the pioneers out to check for demolitions, and then came under fire from the far side of the bridge. The next vehicle round was Fisher, who was adjutant to Perchka in a Panther, and he was hit in the backside.
That's right.
Just on the corner.
Arndt Fisher.
From the tank destroyer dozer, which was parked up here, up this road to the right. We can get out if you like.
Okay.
And go and just have a look at it. And he caught fire. Allegedly, the next vehicle in was Peiper himself, who got out with a Panzerfaust and started to stalk
Yes.
the tank dozer.
I'd heard that.
But in fact, it was knocked out by an SPW with a 76mm on it. And that was really, to all intents and purposes, the end of the battle. Although the Germans say they had a considerable fight here. I don't frankly believe it, because there weren't any American combat troops in the
Right.
real sense here to fight them.
That's right.
So, and most of the Americans got away. They took 22 prisoners, and 8 of them were shot dead, allegedly by a Sergeant Ochman of Peiper's headquarter company, and they're commemorated on the monument just in front of us, which we can go and have a look at. Guys, we've got rubbed out. Sergeant Abraham Lincoln was in fact Lincoln Abraham, his real name, and he did a great job. He was on the 50 caliber machine gun on top of the tank dozer, and he apparently did a magnificent job firing the machine gun. The Germans have told me that one of the reasons these guys were shot was because the German blood was up. They had these casualties. They made these guys bury them, and then they were angry that their comrades had been shot, so they shot them. I've got a picture of the dead Americans actually in that little field there, just down that lane. That's where they shot. We knew, I won't read the whole thing, we knew that the Spitzer with its 2 tanks and few APCs was very weak. As we had no other armoured vehicles immediately available, my Panther, and behind me Colonel Peiper in his APC, followed the Spitzer to Ligneville as fast as we could. Sorry, I'll go back a little bit. When our advance more or less came to a halt at the crossroads, I passed Peiper's order. He was in an APC right behind me, on to Sternebeck. He was to take Ligneville immediately, secure the bridge, which was strategically significant to us, and at the western edge of the village he was to wait for further instructions. I also told him that an American headquarters of considerable rank was possibly in the town. The other units were instructed to advance to Ligneville without delay. Then, as I've said, they advanced as fast as they could. To start off with, I did not notice any fighting, and therefore wanted to cross the bridge. The bridge is just round the corner. On the bend, just before the bridge, I was shot at from behind. My Panther went up in flames. We got out of the tank under machine gun and rifle fire. I suspect that was Sergeant Abraham Lincoln Abraham. We were burning like torches, as only a couple of hours before we had refueled, including our jerry cans, in Bullingen. In doing so, we had soaked our clothing in petrol. My driver never managed to get out and was burned to death. I believe that Colonel Peiper, who gave me cover by fire as I tried to take the bridge, managed to protect us from the American fire from nearby houses. And then he goes on, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for joint responsibility in the Ardennes offensive. Later, the 15 years was reduced to 7, and I was released in '51. I never saw any written documents or evidence. It was all by word of mouth. Dear General Reynolds, I have told you everything I know. I herewith would like to end our correspondence. In fact, I then met him and spent 2 days with him a few years later. Oh, not long, about 2 years later. And we came here and discussed the whole thing. And he couldn't remember the number of his tank, but I got a picture from your father, 152, outside the hotel, and I showed him and I said, there's your tank. He was amazed, absolutely amazed. He thought his tank was 002, I think it was, or something, but it wasn't, it was 152. What?
Overlooking Malmedy to the north, we're on the south. That thin house in the tracks between the wood is the house where Francis Curry was firing from. Across the street from it is the leather factory. The other structures are new. Scorzani was trying to capture that viaduct, which would allow him to proceed down the north bank of the Amblève and reinforce Peiper. The rest of Malmedy is here. And part of Scorzani's attack came down this road. And split into 2 directions.
But they've put an extension on now. But the tank, you see, is literally there where they put the extension.
Yes.
And its gun is facing out across that way, but as far as I can understand it, anyway. But it's for sale. The line on which they were halted. They never got through it. Never got across the Dave says that, of course, they had a lot of tripwires and mines out where we just come. This is the vast river bridge we used to do. There's a picture of that in Haller. Because most of these bridges were wooden trestles, they weren't stone bridges at all. They'd been blown by the Germans when they withdrew in September 7:30, but they didn't. They arrived much nearer 9 o'clock at night. Much nearer.
So this is the Stavelot Bridge.
This is the Stavelot Bridge. We'll go straight up and it cross up to Le Vieux Chateau.
Le Vieux Chateau, yes.
Well, Beauregard, I think. Barrier up here.
Oh, there.
That's where Goldstein was, just there.
Here.
You can walk back up here if you want to.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
So?
Oh, these blocks are all new to stop people getting over. It's actually worth getting out here.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. And then up the hill is fairly steep as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect place for a roadblock.
Yes, it is.
So Hensel was positioned, according to Chuck Hensel, he put him here. And then we'll walk down, shall we?
Goldstein's position. The river. The bend.
We felt, your
Car coming.
hear him, I think. We felt bits of rock falling onto our back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, easy to see. And those were from the mines blowing up?
Yeah, this is some German machine guns.
Oh, the machine guns. Oh, yes.
Getting the clear. Now this is the wall of the old chateau.
Ah, yeah.
With, I think it was Gazziola or Morris, I can't remember, I got it all in my notes, which one was on which weapon. Now for a long, long time, Chuck Hensel didn't say anything about it. For a long time, nor did Dave, about whether anybody helped Hensel site this thing. Dave then, and we were in a big problem of who was the officer at the bottom of the hill when Goldstein got down there. Who was with Liparillo driving? Who was Liparillo driving when he and Goldstein were told to come back up the hill late at 1 o'clock in the night? And Dave then eventually came up with this name, Cliff Wilson, the assistant motor pool officer. And who am I to disagree? I wouldn't know who would.
Yes.
Anyway, I've not met Chuck Hensel since, but it is now accepted, certainly by Dave, that burst of machine gun fire, a machine pistol, and Liparillo was hit and died the next day.
And Goldstein was
hit in the hip and the leg.
And crawled back.
And crawled back to the bridge again. Liparillo was left up here as memorials sticking up behind it. The 825th and to Liparillo on the left will stop at it.